Welcome back to Rewind of the Living Dead. I am Damon Martin.
And happy spooky season. It's me, Patrick Guerra.
And Patrick, we are officially kicking off October with a movie that debuted not too long ago at Fantastic Fest. A little anthology series. We haven't done an anthology yet, have we? This is our first one.
No, we did an anthology before. It was
We
Scary
did. Yes,
Stories
we
to Tell in
did.
the Dark.
Well, no, we also did the one by Spider One, the one with
Allegoria, yeah.
Allegoria, yes. So this is okay. So we've done a couple. This tonight, though, we are actually doing our first ever Into the VHS series, which is a very long-running anthology series. Started in 2012, so we're now 12 years after the first one, and there's like 5 or 6 of these things. And this is the latest one, VHS Beyond.
VHS Beyond released in October of 2024 with a wraparound story directed by Jay Cheel, Stork, directed by Jordan Downey, Dreamgirl, directed by Virat Pal, Live and Let Dive by Justin Martinez, Fur Babies, directed by Justin and Christian Long, yes, that Justin Long, and Stowaway, directed by Kate Siegel, and as you mentioned, her husband, maybe a horror guy you may have heard of called Mike Flanagan wrote that one. Damon, VHS Beyond, we have indeed been living with this anthology for quite some time, but they've decided to go beyond this time around. They are going into sci-fi territory, and you and I, well, we're no fools. We're no novices when it comes to sci-fi horror. We spent the whole year talking about sci-fi horror with the Alien series. VHS Beyond, Damon, are you a VHS guy?
So this is going to make me.
that was a very pregnant pause from Damon Martin, where he was like, how do I say this?
Yeah. So, well, no, and to be perfectly fair, this isn't VHS related. I have seen the first VHS series, the very first one I mentioned. That actually, when you look at the cast, when you look at the guest list, is pretty remarkable. Adam Wingard, Ty West, Radio Silence, like that. When you look at what all those people have gone on to do, that's a freaking list. I saw that one years ago. Definitely didn't see it in 2012 when it came out, but I do remember seeing it within a couple of years of it coming out. But here's the problem, and this, by the way, I'm not judging it by this. I'm just letting you know, like, my general sense of films, like how I enjoy films. I'm not really an anthology guy. I'm not a big anthology film fan. I appreciated what was in the original Creep Show. I remember that one freaking me out when I was a kid, especially the one with the roaches in that episode. I remember that.
Yes.
I do like anthology TV series, though, however, because I'm a big fan of True Detective. I've liked a lot of seasons of American Horror Story, not so much more recently, but in past seasons. Fargo, which I know is not horror, but that's a great anthology series. But when it comes to films, I've not really been a big anthology fan, so it's not that I did or didn't enjoy the original VHS. It's just not a genre that I typically seek out.
And funny enough, the genre that I typically don't seek out is found footage. And here we are with an anthology found footage. This is a double whammy. These are two things that you and I don't like. Now, I don't mind anthology movies quite as much as you do. I know it's not your favorite thing. They don't tend to be like amazing. It's just weird. You're kind of just watching a collection of short films, but at least thematically, they all kind of are related to each other. And very much the VHS series is like, well, our number one thing that relates all these movies is they're going to be found footage. And then as I think they've gotten more sophisticated over the years, 12 years to be exact, which is crazy to think. Now they're going, well, now we're going to be thematic. Now we're going to have, very specific themes that go along with each and every segment. I think, was it VHS 95 or something, or 90,
99. They did VHS 85. They did VHS 99. They've done a couple different ones like that.
Yeah. In 99, I learned of a director who I've come to really adore, Chloe Okuno, who directed Rat King or whatever it was in that one, a segment that I didn't love. And then she turned out one of the most amazing films of that year called Watcher, which I absolutely loved. It's a breeding ground for, top flight directors, and often guest directors who are pretty well known to begin with. So it's one of those things where it's like, am I rushing out to see a VHS movie? Not typically. Thankfully, now they're always on Shudder. Hey, Shudder, how are you?
Hey, Shudder, how are you?
So now it's like, Well, I know they're going to be on Shudder whenever they come out, so that's great. So I don't have to go out to the movie theater because if I'm honest with you, it's not like I'm going to rush out to the movie theater to go see a found footage anthology. That's just not something I would typically do. But now that they are on Shudder and they stream on Shudder, it's a great place to just go, all right, well, let's see what they got. Let's see what each of these different directors is going to show up with. I think anthologies, especially on this level, these are low budget films. You know, this has a reported budget of $600,000, and I'm actually pretty impressed based on what I've seen with VHS Beyond. I feel like each of the directors are like, well, how do I outdo all the rest of them? And I'll let you in on some inside baseball here. I was attached to direct a segment of a found footage film out of the UK. We were well into kind of pre-production. We had broke story. We had a couple of early drafts of scripts. It was a found footage anthology, and I was like, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna direct a found footage film. I was tapped to be the director, and so I was like, let's do this. It fell apart, and that's fine. That happens a lot with a lot of productions, but found footage gives a lot of filmmakers an opportunity to show their stuff on a smaller scale that will eventually be shown to a lot of people because it's wrapped up in this nice package that theaters and distributors and streamers want to check out. So I don't fault them for that. It's just like, oh, does it have to be found footage? You know, there's other ones like Mortuary Chronicles where that was a pretty cool one. Have you seen it yet?
I think I did see that a couple of years ago when that came out. Is that the one with why am I not thinking the actor's name?
It is who you're thinking of, and I can't think of their name either.
from Shawshank Redemption.
Yes.
Why am I not? Yeah. What God? Why cannot I think of his name?
Because we do this podcast way too late at night, where our brains have stopped working. That's why we always do this.
Clancy Brown. Thank you, Clancy Brown.
Clancy Brown.
I have seen that one. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and that one's interesting because it was like that's one director doing multiple segments, so that one actually felt more cohesive. But I like when, and VHS has done this in the last few segments, when they really keep on theme. And tonight's theme, Damon, is sci-fi. What's not to love?
Yeah, and here's the thing. Even though I'm sitting here saying that I'm not a big anthology guy, here's a couple of things I will say about that. One, an anthology that it wasn't pitched as, when I heard about it, it wasn't pitched as an anthology, but it's definitely an anthology film, is the most recent film from Yorgos Lanthimos, which is Kinds of Kindness. Now, it's a different kind of anthology because the same people, Willem Dafoe, Emma Stone, Jesse Plemons, they all star in each segment, but they all play different characters in each segment. Each segment's a little different, and there is a theme to the entire story, but there's three very distinct stories. Now, it's a 3-hour-long film, so each one's about an hour long. I actually really enjoyed it, as weird as it was, but there were two segments I really enjoyed, and then one segment I was kind of like, that didn't really do it for me. And that's kind of the benefit of an anthology film, because you may watch a 6-part anthology and really get drawn to 2 or 3 and then not get drawn to 2 or 3. But you'll always remember the anthology because maybe the 2 or 3 you really did like, or the 2 or 3 you did come away from saying, man, that really impressed me. The other side being found footage. Listen, we can't deny why found footage exists and why it continues to happen is because it's low-cost, low-budget filmmaking. We had one of my favorite, I would argue my favorite found footage director in Stephen Cognetti, who does the Hell House series. Amazing. I actually just recently rewatched all the Hell House series of films. Loved those series and loved that. We had him on our show, and we asked him, could you ever do just a Hell House movie with just, regular filmmaking? He said, yeah, but that also takes the budget higher because it's just a lot more you have to do for that kind of film. And it's true. Like, that's the benefit of found footage. That's how Blair Witch was made for next to nothing and ended up being this huge phenomenon. And now it's gone on because it is a cheap form of filmmaking. And I don't begrudge anyone that, especially when you're trying to make your first film and you just don't have the means to go out and spend $100, $200, $300, $400,000. So even though I know you bump up against found footage and I'm just not a big anthology guy, I think the benefit of what these films do is still to be seen. And I will say this about VHS Beyond, because I heard about it being an anthology sci-fi horror series. And immediately my first thought was that's going to be tough because sci-fi requires effects. And these films typically don't have a big budget. And you and I both know when you have bad effects, it can take you out of a film. Now, yes, I can go back and watch Dark Star, John Carpenter's first student film when he was at USC, and it's not great. It's the effects are bad, but it's just such a fun, it's a film of its time, of the 70s, and you can see where John Carpenter would eventually, and that was a film he wrote with the guys who did Alien, not Ronald Shusett.
Ronald Shusett and Dan O'Bannon. Yeah.
Dan O'Bannon, yes, thank you, Dan O'Bannon. And they end up doing Alien, of course. Dan O'Bannon and John Carpenter, you know what I mean? Where it's not good. It's not great. You can go back and watch it. It's not a great film, but you can just see the bits and pieces of what would become John Carpenter in those films. So my first initial thought with VHS Beyond was, I don't know, man, this might be kind of rough for like the effects and everything. And I gotta say, overall, there's one segment the effects were a little rough, and we'll talk about that in spoilers. The rest of them I thought looked pretty good. Like they were, I guess I don't need to, I guess I could name the segment. I didn't think it had good effects. I'm not spoiling anything. The one segment I thought did not have great effects was the Fur Baby segment, the one that was directed by Christian and Justin Long. Now, to be fair, it's not like it was directed badly. It's just the concept of what it is, I think, required a little bit more budget, and they didn't clearly have that. So that one looked a little rough. But the rest of them, for what they were, I was pretty impressed, and I think that goes to show you the amount of genius you can tuck into a $600,000 film and make it work, because the rest of these segments didn't really look bad.
I don't know who came up with the idea that this time we're going to do sci-fi, but it was a really wise choice, because, and this is something I'm curious if you were like this when you were growing up. I was obsessed with alien footage, like the footage of UFOs, footage of some, I remember in the 90s there was that autopsy footage that was going around. Do you remember that? Do you remember?
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
I want to say they even got Stan Winston to like look at the footage, and he said he like laughed it out of the room. He goes, if this guy sent me this as his reel, I'd laugh him out of the room. And I was like, wow, because I was like I totally bought it. I totally thought it was real. This is the 90s. This is pre-internet. This is pre AI that can like create things that look real and all that stuff. So I thought to myself, like, this is actually a good playground for VHS, because it's all about capturing footage, capturing some of these aren't even low quality footage. I wouldn't even say that. It's just the idea of capturing something that is not supposed to exist. It is in and of itself its own kind of mythology. The idea of like, we're going to capture on video an alien. I mean, listen, what's the most memorable moment of Signs? The moment where there's the news footage of the alien emerging in Brazil. It taps into something that I think people of a certain age were genuinely obsessed with.
Vamonos, children, vamonos.
Yeah, vamonos. But were you like that growing up, where it's like, when I was watching TV, I was obsessed with that stuff?
I also grew up loving the X-Files, which did not help my whole, I mean,
there it is.
I would say, when I say it didn't help, I mean, it made me even more obsessed with like the old alien idea, because X-Files is a genius TV show and I loved it. And yeah, of course. So absolutely, and I do remember that alien autopsy thing. And because I don't remember how I was young. I don't remember what age I was or what grade around that it came on, but I do remember me and my friends being like, how do we get the footage? How do we see it? Where can we get it at? It was, because again, that was in the days when you just couldn't go in and type youtube.com/alien autopsy and it would be there. These were like VHS tapes getting passed around. You'd hear about it and you'd not see it, and you'd see clips. I think I remember seeing, like, maybe it was a magazine, they had a photo, it was a real grainy photo of the It might have been National Enquirer for all I can remember. But yeah, so I do remember that. And VHS Beyond, here's what I like about this anthology series, this particular, and again, remember, I've only seen the first one, so I can't speak to the other ones. But what I like about this is, while this is an alien or sci-fi focused anthology, every one of these films really does feel original and different than the one you saw before it. And I think that's interesting because we've had this conversation before when we were talking about the Alien series, the Alien, actual franchise. And part of the thing I bumped up against the most in that entire prequel with Prometheus and then Alien Covenant was just too much background on the xenomorphs. Just I didn't need to know all that. They're scarier because I don't know where they came from. Right. And sometimes, and we talked about this with some films, like you could do a version of a film where they tell you like how the aliens landed there, where they came from. What is, even though like what I loved about Independence Day, which is still an all-time classic blockbuster, they have that one little moment where the president has like a weird, mind meld with one of the aliens, and he said they're like locusts. They go from planet to planet, taking all the natural resources before moving on. It's a very one-line throwaway line. That's it. That's all you know about them. You don't know where they came from. You don't know what planet they just came from. You don't know where they're going next. Just that little moment of like, they're just here to harvest our resources. Okay, cool. I don't need anything else. It's one line. That's it. One line. And he says, nuke the bastards. That's it. And what I liked about this film is that every segment feels unique, and every segment isn't just aliens invading or we see, flying saucers in the sky. All those themes, this isn't a spoiler, but all those themes do play a part in this anthology, but every single segment is different. Not every segment is, I saw something in the sky, or look at the little green men, or what's behind that bush, Vamanos children. None of that. It's just every segment feels, so I appreciate that. Now, I'm sure the team behind this said, hey, if we're going to do VHS Beyond, we need every segment to feel different. We can't just do 6 of the same segments. So I'm sure that played a part in it. But I do appreciate to me, alien sci-fi is not, sci-fi is not easy. What I'm saying is like sci-fi alien stories, it feels like you do get a little redundant, right? You do get a little repetitive. It's, aliens landing on Earth, or we've seen aliens. At least, there's not not a ton of mixed things to do in there. And I do appreciate the VHS Beyond explored a lot of different realms of that.
And Damon, because I know we dance around a lot of stuff in the non-spoiler section, but what I will do is I will give our audience at least a very brief synopsis of each segment. So the wraparound, which we haven't even really addressed what the wraparound is, but typically in a anthology, a wraparound story is a story that interweaves all of the stories. And this time they very wisely played it like a proper alien documentary, a documentary about extraterrestrials and about a family that may or may not have been visited by aliens. So that's the wraparound story. I actually really dug that one. I liked how it came out, and I liked its conclusion very much. Then there's a segment called Stork, as we said, directed by Jordan Downey, who directed some pretty cool movies. Have you seen Headhunter?
I have not.
Headhunters are pretty cool, and he's directed a few that I think I know of. But anyway, so Jordan Downey directs Stork, which is police body cam footage, and they're looking for missing people. So that's kind of a way to kind of put a template on this, like, alien abduction, what's going on, right? And this police force is after what they believe are somebody taking these people, and it turns out it's something beyond, Damon, of course. Then there's Dream Girl, directed by Virat Pal, and it's about an Indian music artist, like a music celebrity, who people are rumor that she might be a witch. Well, maybe she's something beyond that, Damon. Of course, beyond being a very important theme in this. Then there's Live and Let Dive, directed by Justin Martinez, which is about a bunch of friends going on a birthday skydiving excursion. You're up in the air. You got GoPros on because you're all going to go skydiving. Maybe if you see something up in the sky, things happen, right? Good excuse to have the camera rolling, by the way. This is one of those ones, and this is always something I bump up against, Damon. You know this. Why is the camera still rolling? Well, these guys, they have GoPros on their chests, and they're all doing birthday party stuff. So the camera's always rolling. And even after things go bad, they were just freaked out. They're not thinking about turning their cameras off. They're just running around going absolutely batshit because things are going on. So I appreciated at least that one attempted to make it completely make sense why the camera never turned off. Segment 4, Fur Babies, directed by Justin Long and Christian Long. Christian Long, if you don't know, is Justin Long's brother. And that is about a group of animal rights activists who believe that a woman is running some sort of a puppy mill or something like that, and they actually want to check her out to make sure she's not abusing animals, and they get far more than they're bargained for. And then Stowaway is directed by Kate Siegel, and as you mentioned, written by the great Mike Flanagan, and that is about a woman who is doing like a kind of a self-made documentary about the lights in the Mojave Desert, and that's one of those things, Damon. Like the year's 1996, I'm watching Fox Channel 5 because they have some weird alien like video thing on, and they're showing the Mojave lights, in this 1 hour segment or something. It's like it's proper mythology and it's proper lore. It's stuff that like I've remembered since I was a kid. I really appreciate that Kate Siegel and Mike Flanagan tapped into that because it's something that I've just utterly been obsessed with since I was young.
Yeah, I think all the segments, and as I said, all the segments are very individual and very unique in their own right, and they all dive into a different realm of sci-fi horror. There are aliens involved in some of the segments, there's no doubt about that, but some of it is just pure sci-fi, which is also interesting because I think that gets missed a little bit in the whole VHS Beyond. When you say sci-fi horror, some people just assume it is alien related because that's just what sci-fi means to some people. This one does dive a little deeper into other realms of sci-fi, which I appreciate. And yeah, like and to your point about the whole found footage thing, because I know it drives you crazy. Why would you keep the camera rolling? That is the thing that you just pound your head against the desk and say, why are you still doing this? Very much. I've said this, and this is coming from a Mike Flanagan fan who thinks The Haunting of Hill House is a brilliant, brilliant piece of filmmaking. But from doing the show with me for 4+ years, Patrick, the reason why I don't really enjoy haunted house stories is because the simple solution is just get the fuck out. Filmmakers have tried to get savvy on that now. Like, we've invested so much money, we can't get out. Okay, and one reason I enjoyed Insidious and even Paranormal Activity, which was found footage, was the concept was the entity, so to speak, was attached to a person, not the house.
Yeah, right.
That I enjoyed. That was like, okay, here's a haunted house story that doesn't just mean get out of the house. But generally speaking, much like you had found footage, like, why aren't you just turning off the fucking camera? Me with haunted houses, just like, get out, stay at the hotel down the road and figure it out later. Or sleep in your car. I don't care. Just get out of the house. And that's why I bump up against haunted house movies so often. The found footage, I will say, to give them credit, I think most of the segments here, for the most part, actually make sense with the found. I think they're getting better at that. Like, they're getting better at, because I think a lot of the people who did make found footage, and I know it didn't start before all the Cannibal Holocaust people come from my throat. I know it didn't start with Blair Witch Project, but it started with Blair Witch Project. That was the one that blew up found footage. When you hear found footage talked about in the general film community, that's the one they're talking about. Even then, back then, I didn't hear a lot of people who saw Blair Witch Project, and you can go back and listen to our episode when we talked about that one. They were just astounded at how it worked. Like, they're like, how does this work? It's so scary, it's so effective, and it's a mostly black and white, grainy, put together, chopped pieces of a film together, and you never see anything. You never see a creature. You never see the Blair Witch. And people are like, this works so well, and it did. When I saw it in the theater the first time, it freaked me the hell out. They weren't paying attention to the idea of why are you still rolling the cameras when you're doing this. But as years have gone on, savvy filmmakers or savvy fans have said, hold on now. You're running for your life. Why are you still filming what's fucking running behind you? What are you doing? No one would do that. You would drop the camera and get out, much like my haunted house problem. So I think one thing that this film does really well is it's the 2024 evolution of found footage, where every segment, for the most part, you kind of understand why they're still filming. You kind of see the reason why they're holding onto that camera. And I appreciate that creativity because I think that's the evolution of filmmaking, is understanding that, like, yes, if you're running for your life, the last thing you're going to think about is turning on your fucking camcorder, turning it around to see the creature chasing you. That just doesn't happen.
It's about craft. That's what really why it gets under my skin a lot. Because I go, I'm always supportive of the idea of found footage for low budget filmmakers. It's a way for them to tell stories and get people interested in their abilities as filmmakers and their abilities as storytellers. So I'm always backing that up. But when they use found footage lazily, it lacks craft. Now it's just like, well, I guess we'll just, we got really mad at Trap earlier this year because there was a point in the movie that was so impossible for the people to get out of. They just cut away from it and cut back to them out of the situation because they knew desperately there was no way those people were going to get out of the situation. It's kind of what found a lot of lazier found footage does, which is like, oh, well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The camera would still be rolling. Let's just keep the camera rolling. If you find a good way to do it, you are crafting good storytelling. You are using found footage to its advantage. It's an advantage in certain situations. But if you can make it make sense consistently inside the story, you are showing me craft. You are showing me your ability to make all the elements that you are using to make a movie to your full advantage. And then I go, damn, I have to respect that. So my overall, like, my kind of broad statement before we get into spoilers is basically just to say that, like, is VHS my favorite anthology series or my favorite franchise out there? It's not really, but VHS Beyond takes it a step further with its found footage plausibility, I should say. The plausibility in VHS Beyond makes way more sense than your average found footage movie that is streaming for free on Tubi right now.
Now, let me give you one of my biggest criticisms of VHS Beyond, if you don't mind. And this goes back to the found footage thing, and I think you'll appreciate this. Now, the criticism I'm about to lay on this front door is understanding that I know why they're not doing what I'm criticizing them for, but at the same time, this goes back to your argument of why are you still filming? We live in an era now where I would say at least 80% of people have a modern cell phone. And modern cell phones have extremely good cameras. I have an iPhone 15. I don't have the iPhone 16 yet. I saw someone shoot footage at an NBA basketball thing the other night for footage, and they showed it zoomed in, and it would look crystal clear, like they were watching a free throw shooting. And then they zoomed back out, and the guy was literally in like the nosebleeds. I was like, holy shit! Like, and I've done that too. I've shot concert footage where I'm kind of back in the crowd, and I zoom in with my iPhone 15. I'm like, God, this is remarkable! Like how good the footage is from, like, I'm not that close. Like, I'm in the crowd, but I'm pretty far back. Because you remember back in the day when you tried to shoot that, it would look grainy and it would look like hell. Yeah. It would look like it would look like the worst footage ever captured. My one criticism here is that I understand why they do it, because they're working with low budgets. They're trying to keep things kind of grainy and in the shadows. What we always talk about, not cheating, but cheating in a way of like hiding the fact that you don't have a $10 million budget. So you have to keep things kind of in the shadows. You can't really get too HD. You can't get too high definition or people are going to see what you're really actually working with. I understand that. But this anthology, I think pretty much every film in this series, and in this Beyond, in VHS Beyond, not the entire series, It looks like everything was shot with like a 1998 camcorder. And I'm just like, I understand why you're doing it. I'm not criticizing you necessarily for doing it. But in 2024, we all have iPhones. We all have, Pixel cameras. We all have Samsung Galaxies. Don't tell me that all the footage is going to look like it was recorded on the camcorder I had back when I was 14 or whatever. My parents had like the giant, the big actually record on VHS. Remember those? Like, I understand why. I do, but it's just like your argument about like, why are you still recording? At least be honest with me about this, because like everything looks that way. And I understand why they're doing it because they don't have a budget, but it just bugs me a little bit because I'm just like, The Weeknd, the artist The Weeknd, who I like, he just shot his new music video nothing but iPhone 16s. Now, to be fair, when they say they're shooting on iPhone 16s, they're shooting through lenses and everything else, but they are technically still shooting on an iPhone. But I've recorded things on iPhone. I've recorded plenty of interviews on iPhones when I've been to events, and they look just as crisp and clear as anything my guy sitting next to me with a DSLR camera has done. My point being, Patrick, I understand cheating. I do. I get it. I understand why you got to make it look grainy and beat up and, but doesn't that seem a little bit like we got to figure a better way out of this? Because we live in an era now where even iPhone 12s, which is 5 years ago or whatever it is, even those had pretty good video. Yeah, and
4K
it
video.
Just seems, everything they're shooting is it all looks like a 1995 camcorder.
I mean, I will say that Stork, the first one, the police one, that's pretty HD. Yeah, they used that one. The other ones that don't were like Dream Girl, where it's like paparazzi. They kind of use lower grade cameras. That's not out of the realm, but you're right. Even in India, where that one takes place, they have fantastic smartphones in India. It's one of the biggest smartphone markets on the planet. We're third place behind them in China because there's so many users there.
The idea of paparazzi, they're trying to get footage and videos to sell. They're not going to get you grainy footage. That's the only way you're going to sell it.
Yeah. It's kind of BS. Live and Let Dive does stay HD because they're using GoPros, so they're okay. Fur Babies. Now I can't spoil this, but at least Fur Babies, when they do cut to the footage that looks like shit, they're trying to imply that the person filming it might be outdated themselves. Again, it's kind of a stretch, but I was okay, at least you're trying to make it make sense. Interestingly enough, Stowaway, which is the one that fully is what you're talking about, where it's fully grainy camcorder footage from the 90s. I remember we got my dad a camcorder for Christmas one year, and it boy, that video looks like dog shit. It looked like dog shit the day we shot it, never mind 35 years later. That one is at least set in that time period. It's set in a time period where she's trying to document this stuff on her old camcorder, so it does look like shit. And honestly, that one of all the ones I liked the most. If I'm gonna slightly spoil our categories later, but I think it's because it reminded me so much of the 90s. In the 90s, when you were watching footage, on this very special episode of Unsolved Mysteries, the footage of the alien spaceship going across the Mojave Desert, it was that old 90s camcorder that couldn't pick up that. Really what it probably was military drones, because back then they already had that technology and all that stuff. You weren't seeing anything that was truly of another world, but the camcorder did degrade and make the footage so blurry you couldn't quite tell. You just wanted to believe. So for Stowaway, I'll give it a pass because I'm at least it's set in the right time era. I think it's probably the best crafted one. I don't want to spoil too much of my best segment. I just think it's well crafted because it is actually set in that time period and it harkens back to that aesthetic that I grew up with.
No, and I don't disagree with that. I guess I'm making a generalization for the film as a whole, because this happens a lot with found footage. This kind of speaks to your why is the camera still rolling? My thing is why are you still using a camcorder from 1995 to capture your footage?
Paparazzi in India should have had fucking 4K smartphones. You can get a cheap one. I'm talking you could probably go to your cell phone provider right now in India and go, give me the cheapest 4K cell phone that you got, and they'll be all right, $30. It's not. Yeah. It's I work for tech companies a part of the time. It's cheap technology now to have extra HD stuff. So yeah, it is kind of funny that things are grainy when they don't need to be.
And I listen, I think Stowaway was a very impressive bit of filmmaking. Obviously, you're a bit of a leg up when you're dealing with Mike Flanagan's script and directed by Kate Siegel, who is an incredible actor in her own right, and now directing her first feature. And I think this is just a harbinger of the future, what she's going to be doing and directing her own feature films eventually. Stowaway was really, and again, one of the things I liked about Stowaway it reminded me of the X-Files. Like, it reminded me, because if you go back and watch some of those
Yeah.
early X-Files episodes, the opening is always, not always, but a lot of times, it's like somebody out filming footage of, like, somebody in a house, or they think they've seen something and they're trying to capture it, and then obviously Mulder and Scully have to go in there and investigate. It kind of reminded me of that. Now, I don't know, because I don't have Mike Flanagan's phone number to call him up. Mike, if you want to give me your number, I can hit you up on this.
Big
I
fan
don't
of
know
ours,
if
Mike
this was
Flanagan.
I don't know if this is inspired by the X Files, but that's the vibe I got. And so, yes, you're right, because it's set in that era, which is the early X Files episodes, that early mid 90s. I understand. You're not wrong. You're absolutely not wrong. I'm just saying, in general, it's just like I know why you're doing it. Even with the GoPros in the one segment where they're in the plane, I understand like GoPros are HD, but there are still a couple moments where it's like a little broken up, and I'm like,
Oh yeah.
I've seen GoPros fall down a mountain, and you literally see like every
Damn it.
detail of the rock, and like,
My job for years was working with GoPros and off-road racing. We would like attach them to off-road trucks that are doing 60 miles an hour off a dirt road that no car could traverse, and they look perfect. Like there's
yeah,
never a glitch, there's never like a weird static thing. They throw those things in to kind of like up the aesthetic, obviously. And
I know it just,
and we see it too much. It's kind of, I
but
would say
that's
it's
what that's what
overused.
that's what takes me out of it a little bit, because I'm just like, hold on now, I'm not a you're a GoPro expert, I'm not, but I've seen a lot of GoPro footage, and it's like, I'm always blown away. It's so remarkable like, what you can capture on it. There was a time where I almost bought a GoPro just to like play with it, because I was like, it's incredible what you can do with these things. Like, this is insane. They're all supposed to be wearing GoPros. Like, come on
Yeah.
now. Like, I know the footage isn't going to be all broken up and beat up, and again, it kind of takes me out of it. I know I keep repeating myself with the whole like, why are you filming? But even with that, like, now I will say the opening segment, Stork, not the wraparound segment. Stork is the first segment actually shown. It involves cops, and they're wearing like body cams. Now, I will say, as a reporter in my day job, I've actually watched a lot of body cam footage, and it's not tremendous. It's not
Yeah.
it's not usually full on HD. So that one I give and as you said, that is more HD. It does look like they're shooting on GoPros and actually keeping GoPros, and it looks pretty good. Also, I think what Stork does well, which again, this isn't a knock on the other segments, but what Stork does well is I'd say about 75% of that segment, you're in a pretty well lit area. So you have to be able to see it. I think that's what takes me out of it sometimes, when you get to the segments where it's like it's lit pretty well, it's daylight, and the footage still looks kind of like ass. And I'm just like, at least in Stork, yes, they're wearing body cams, so that's a lot of what you're seeing. But they're inside of a house with lights, not professional lights, but just lights. So that one's a little bit better. But again, overall, and the paparazzi one is definitely the one that I was just like, come on now, like, you're not going to be shooting. Come on, like, if you're a paparazzi in any country of the world, you're not going to be shooting with an old camcorder. No one's going to pay you for that footage. People are shooting with long range lenses across like highways and getting better footage than that.
My biggest gripe with found footage, and this applies to VHS Beyond and like quite literally every single other found footage film outside of maybe the Blair Witch and maybe the original Hell House, is first of all, how the hell is all this footage being collated? Like, who's collating? And I think when we had Steve Cognetti on here, he kind of explained like there's two different types, where it's like you have to just let go of that idea. You have to just completely suspend the idea and just accept that this footage is magically all put together. And the second is that there is an unseen editor who has created this story for you, who has taken all this footage, curated it, and put it all together. That one always just bugs me, because I go, like, okay, if I was editing this, I would certainly edit out this part where that person's being annoying. I would take that out. But that's me. That's my editing style, where I'd be like, my audiences don't want to see this. But that's a stylistic choice that is very popular in found footage, which is like, oh no, I want everybody arguing right now. I just did I'm trying and attempting to do 31 Days of Horror. And I did a film called The Houses October Built, and I did the original version, not the remade version with a better budget and actual big scares and all that stuff. The original version is just people driving around arguing with each other, and maybe things happen in the dark. I can't tell. It's not a scary movie. It's just an annoying movie. But you go, why would you chop that together and give that to people? I do think VHS Beyond, for the most part, really tries to avoid that as best it can. They also have the advantage that's like, well, my segment's only 10 minutes. So in 10 minutes, you're not going to bother with like a long argument, which I swear, this is a message to all found footage filmmakers. You don't have to make a 90-minute found footage film. You can make your found footage, 40 minutes and more is considered a feature film. So make your found footage film, cut out all the extraneous arguments, all of the expository dialogue that is exhausting and everybody is totally bored with, and all the arguments that really make the audience go, why the fuck are these people even friends? You can cut that stuff out and just make a tight 50, 60-minute film that is very interesting, very scary, very, very thrilling. Cut that shit out. VHS Beyond does not have that issue. I'm just like, I'm doing like a longer rant for why I don't like found footage.
And one last thing I want to say about this before we get to spoilers. One thing I will give VHS Beyond credit for, and I'm talking about every single segment. One thing I've bumped up against in some anthologies, not necessarily VHS, just anthologies in general, is because you're jumping into a short story. You're jumping into a short film. And in a short film, which, a short film can be 60 seconds, it can be, 30 minutes. There's no, as you said, 40 minutes considered a feature film. There are short films that are 30 minutes long. Every film, every segment in VHS Beyond is no more than 15 minutes. Am I right? I think about 15 minutes.
Yeah, I think
max. So. To their credit, even though I didn't love every segment, I liked some better than others. And again, I think that's the point of the anthology. If you don't like one, you'll like the next one. I get it. They all had pretty cohesive stories, and I appreciate it. I know that sounds like such a weird compliment to pay. Like, you did cohesive storytelling. Way to go. But they did. Like, they all had cohesive stories to where when it started and when it ended, I was like, I know where you were going with this, and I know what was happening. I was not confused. I was not... I'm sorry I'm picking on a film here, Patrick, but you know which one I'm talking about. We did a review of a movie a couple years ago called The Outwaters, and when that was over, I wanted to smack myself in the face with a tack hammer because I was like, what was that? Like, and because I had so many people who were like, oh, it's so brilliant. It's just, whatever. And I'm just like, listen, again, I always say this, to each their own. You found it brilliant, thought it was amazing. I'm happy for you. Me personally, I wanted to beat my head into a piece of drywall and see how far I could drive myself through it. That one was just like when it was, and that was a 90-minute film. Like when that was over, I was just like, what did I just watch?
Damon, Damon, Skinamarink is 2 hours long. Skinamarink could be a 20-minute short film that you would find brilliant and terrifying.
Yeah.
It's 2 hours long. And you go, okay, cool. There was like 20 minutes of cool stuff in there, and an hour plus of things that I didn't care about.
Film,
you don't have to fit that long format. You don't.
Every film is different. You and I did two separate, you did a video, I did a written one on the new Salem's Lot remake, which just dropped on Max. And you enjoyed it, and I did too. But my biggest criticism as a guy who's read the book and saw the original miniseries directed by Tobe Hooper was the new film felt rushed. It was an hour and 54 minutes, and I said, man, when it was over, I was like, this feels like it was like an hour and 20 minutes. It was so fast. And I said my biggest criticism, or my biggest I wish we had, is because Gary Dauberman, the director and the writer, said originally it was a 3-hour movie. Because if you read the book and you see the original miniseries, it's just so much more. My only criticism was I wanted more. Like, I want another hour so you could actually give me the bits and pieces you cut out and, like, give me a little bit more character development, things like that, that's in the book and in the original. Because the original miniseries was two-hour movies, made-for-TV movies directed by Tobe Hooper, of course, who also directed, of course, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and the original Poltergeist movie. That's to me is the definitive Salem's Lot. Every film is different. Some films need 2-3 hours. Some films need 20 minutes. And I think what VHS Beyond does effectively is they're all 15 minutes-ish segments. Yeah. They all have cohesive storytelling. I think even though the grainy stuff bugs me, overall I think talented filmmakers, I think mostly talented storytellers. I don't want to get into the one segment that I really didn't enjoy in this whole thing quite yet because I don't want to spoil anything for you.
Oh God, I want to get into it.
But again, like, and I'm saying this as a guy that this film's not for me, Patrick. It's just not. Like, I'm not an anthology guy. When I'm sitting around on a Friday night on Shudder, hey Shudder, and I'm looking for a movie to watch, I'm typically not, when I click on it says anthology, I usually go back and look for something else. It's just not for me. It's not my favorite kind of format of film. But I thought VHS Beyond, for the most part, was pretty solid, and what stood true with what anthologies want and what I got of Kinds of Kindness worked. One segment was pretty good. The next segment was all right. The next segment was and then it got good again. And then the final segment, which of course was Stowaway, the one by Kate Siegel and Mike Flanagan, I was like, okay, I dig this. So everything's different, and so I think that's the benefit of this. Like, I'll be surprised if every single person who watches VHS Beyond comes out saying, man, 10 out of 10 every segment.
Right.
You know, I don't think that's the point. I don't think they go into it thinking you're going to have that reaction.
I mean, I think they do hope, right? You're going to think every one of them is a complete fucking banger. Yeah, I'm not going to, we will wait to talk about the ones that didn't work for us. I say there's two in here that really didn't work for me, even though like I could see their strengths. There's one that is like my absolute giving part 5, and we'll get to that shortly. But yeah, for the most part, I think this is my favorite VHS in the entire series, because even the ones where I was like, oh, okay, I see what they're doing here. Like, there was like 3 segments I didn't like. At 3 out of 5 or 6 is a lot to not like. This one, I'm like saying, pretty much all of them. One I would throw out, like fully throw out. Stay tuned for that. One I would fully throw out. One I take about half of it, and the rest I was like, I get what you're doing. To me, that's a win. And so it's like I will crown this so far like my favorite of the VHS series.
I mean, like I said, I've only seen the other one. I've only seen the first one, so I can't give you.
Oh, you haven't seen VHS 85 or 99 or any of those?
Only seen the very first one, yeah. So I can only give you that. But again, I thought it was solid, and because it's sci-fi, the best comparison I can make to it is a series that I absolutely adore, and I watch every single episode, watch every single season, and when it's over, there's generally like one that I don't particularly love, and then like 4 that are really good, and that's Black Mirror. What Black Mirror does, I love Black Mirror, and that's sci-fi. It's sci-fi, not necessarily horror. There are horror. It's sci-fi more than horror. There are horror segments though, but that to me is like the ultimate anthology, because I don't know. I think at this point there's maybe like 20 episodes total, because the seasons are super short. They're like 6 episodes each. I think we're on season 6 now or whatever. Out of like, let's just say hypothetically there's 20 episodes, I would say like 16 of those have been really good, and there's been like 4 that were like, all right. Or maybe 12 that were outstanding, 4 that were pretty good, and then 4 that were just like, yeah, I don't need to watch this again. But that's still a pretty good batting average for a show like that, where every episode is about an hour long. The anthologies here, what do we got? Is it 5 or 6 total? Am I 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? And the wraparound. I'm not counting the wraparound because that's like segmented in between.
Yeah,
so
which I like the wraparound, by the way.
I'll say out of the 5 segments, there were 3 I liked pretty well. 2 didn't work, and 1 in particular really didn't work. Like the 2 that didn't work, I didn't love either one, but there's one that I was just like, what? Huh? No, don't do that. Don't. So yeah, but again, we're looking for batting averages. 3 out of 5 ain't bad.
It ain't bad, and for a franchise that I'm not super in love with, yeah, I think Beyond is my favorite so far.
Yeah. All right, folks, we are now going to get into spoilers. If you haven't seen VHS Beyond, it is currently available on Shudder. If you can't tell by our reactions, it's worth your time. I mean, I'll say it again. You're hearing this from one guy who hates found footage and one guy who doesn't like anthologies. And we're saying, you know what? It wasn't bad. I know that's not like the glowing review that you maybe hope for, but again, I think when you hear me say not bad about an anthology, you say not bad about a found footage film, that's like a fucking Oscar-worthy moment. So So check it out now on Shudder. And as I said, if you haven't seen it, or again, if you just don't care, we're now going to get into spoilers on all of our categories. So we are now in spoiler section. And with our spoilers this week, we have a couple of extra special guests to join us. A couple of our friends from the HorrorTok community. First off, I want to introduce one of the guys I actually followed very, very early on when I got onto TikTok and was into horror. And he goes by Slasher Talk over there. His real name is Justin. Justin, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for doing this and kind of crossing over into the podcast world instead of the horror talk world.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. I didn't know that you followed me early on, so that's news to me. Love to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. And
legend.
And our other guest, of course, he is Chuck, and he wants to be your movie guy. I was dying to say that this entire time.
That's my jam, Chuck. I'd love to be your movie guy. Thanks for having me, guys. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Absolutely.
Now,
You guys, I was just gonna say, you guys kill it on TikTok, and this is kind of part of what we're doing this month with being October, and of course being the month of horror. We're kind of doing a month of our favorite creators. So you guys absolutely kill it over there. So we're trying to learn from you on TikTok. So hopefully you guys have some fun on our podcast today.
Yeah, I'm new to the whole podcast. I'm not like new to the podcast thing. I've done like 7 or so now, but like I'm getting more used to the vibes for sure.
Yeah, same.
And I think Damon really he was the brainchild, of course, of this podcast, but also of this idea of just bringing people in October who are super important to us, because honestly, Damon and I don't have the time to see every movie, and we have learned to lean on the HorrorTok community to give us great recommendations. And this was kind of our way of giving back, because sometimes podcasts and TikTok don't necessarily cross over. So some of our listeners who are like, I don't even have a TikTok, I'm like, you can change that today, and you can follow Chuck, and you can follow Justin, and you can learn about horror films. That's how we're learning about horror films, from the HorrorTok community. It's a really great community. There's a ton of really nice and wonderful people on there, and I'm really feeling a lot of love on there. Everybody who's in the horror community usually knows that the horror community is actually a really sweet and kind and welcoming group. And it was, for us, a no-brainer to bring you guys on today. So I'm super happy to have you both.
That's awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. All week I've heard that there's something fundamentally wrong with me for liking horror, so it's good to hear otherwise.
Yeah.
If I see that video of that girl saying that there's fundamental, if I see that video one more time, I think my head might explode. I'm like, good Lord. I was like, that's like the most viral video on my TikTok right now. With that being said, you guys actually were lucky enough. You were actually at the world premiere for VHS Beyond, the movie we're reviewing tonight at Fantastic Fest. So I want to come in to Justin. I'll kind of throw it to you first. Like, how was that experience, like actually seeing it in the theater? Because for Patrick and I, you know, we're watching on Shudder. We love Shudder. Hello, Shudder. But we're not getting to see it on. We're not getting to see it on a big screen. So how was that experience at Fantastic Fest?
No, I said it in my review. I said I had the absolute privilege of seeing this particular VHS film on the big screen, which I have never had that experience before. Plus, I'm sitting next to Chuck the Legend. I'm sitting next to Horror Chronicles. I'm sitting next to all of our friends, and all the directors are there, some of the actors and stuff. So it's an entirely different experience. But seeing this particular VHS on the big screen was just quite the good sound. We were sitting literally front row, and I was just like, it hits off with that stork segment, and we were all just like all in.
Chuck, what about you? I mean, obviously, I think part of what I watch a lot of horror films at home. I have a 75-inch TV. I have the sound bar and everything, but it's still different being in the theater, and you just experience it different. I remember when I was like, my favorite horror franchise is Nightmare on Elm Street. I was too young to see the original in theaters, and I remember I went to a theater when they just showed it in a theater years ago, and I was like, I've seen this movie a dozen times, but it still plays different when you see it in the theater. So how was it for you seeing the VHS Beyond? Because again, I don't think any of these have really shown in theaters before, not that I can remember.
No, it definitely hits different in the theater because, especially because the whole entire crowd chose to see that movie. You know what I mean? So, like, you're getting a lot of people that dig and love found footage to see it on the big screen. So, plus, we've seen it at like, I think it started at 11:45 at night. So, half the crowd was already tuned up from the bar and after the 8 o'clock movie. So, like, it was a little wild because you get that fan reaction. And, like, just like you said, when it went into Stork, like, you knew immediately 3 minutes in that this was something different. This wasn't your regular VHS because I thought Stork went hard, I mean, from the get go.
Yeah.
And plus, being with your friends and everything, like it was, it made the movie better than the movie actually is, but I'm still sticking with it because the sentiment of the memorable experience is part of my experience.
I watched your guys' TikToks and your Instagrams, and I was just fully like excited and happy and altogether jealous for you guys because I've done film festivals before and I've done a few in Austin specifically, and it's like a town that's kind of built to do film festivals. It's a whole other experience when you're with a crowd that's all riled up and all excited to see something. It's just a whole new level. And I mean, I think about, we keep bringing up Stork. Stork is 100% a big screen experience. I can't imagine being front row while that thing is like first person shooter, blasting, chainsaws coming at you, guns blazing, everything. It's like a full action piece. And then you have Live and Let Dive, which is like a first person skydiving video. That's got to be insanity.
Listen, I'm not the biggest fan of like heights. Like one of my biggest fears is like being forced to skydive. So being in the front row, I'm like, oh shit. And when they jump out, when like they fall, I was like, I don't like this. But it was so sick to experience because I was like, this would not feel this way at home.
No
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, and I want to really encourage our listeners that if you live in a town where festivals happen, go to a festival. It's an experience, it's a movie going experience like no other. It's really a whole different thing. And you spend a couple days or a whole week or however you want sitting in a room with people who are super pumped to see movies. It's just a whole other game.
Now,
Agreed.
before we get into our categories, I want to throw just to kind of throw off the subject right now, kind of throw you guys off and not prepare for this. At the start of our non-spoiler part, Patrick and I kind of talked about two things with VHS, the series in general, that we kind of bump up against. Patrick is not a huge found footage fan. It's been well documented on this show. We've reviewed Blair Witch Project. We've reviewed Hell House LLC, which are both probably two of our all-time favorite found footage, but there's a reason why we don't review a lot because Patrick is a very devout non-found footage guy. On the flip side, I said I'm not a big anthology guy. I've just never loved anthologies in terms of like movies. I kind of like to see one complete story versus six, five, whatever, little short stories. So we kind of set the stage right away to say, like, here's a couple of things we kind of had bumping up against going into VHS Beyond, even though ultimately I think we did enjoy it. So I'll throw it to you guys. I'll throw it to you first, Justin. Like, are you a found footage guy? Or are you an anthology guy? Because these are two genres in one with this particular series.
Yeah, I'm definitely a found footage guy. I mean, Blair Witch started it. I was like in fourth grade when I saw that film, and it scared the shit out of me. So it's just since then, I was just kind of like, just that handheld camera vibe. I saw Paranormal Activity in the theater when that came, when that was going around, and just I'm a sucker for it. It just gives me so much more like this is actually happening. Now, there's a bunch of tropes and things that like it kind of takes me out of it, but overall, like when it's done extremely well, it's so effective for me personally. And then yeah, again the same thing. If like when an anthology film is done well, I love it.
Chuck, what about you?
I love both. I'll watch shitty found footage movies until my eyes bleed, just looking for the one that hits. You know what I mean? Because like the payoff when they hit is so good that it's worth going through all the 3.1 rated ones on IMDb to get to that point. but also as I've progressed, like as an adult and a horror lover, I also love found footage for the reason that it gives independent filmmakers and artists a voice without having money. And some of the greatest directors that we've gotten into horror started out with a shaky cam or running through the woods. And so I respect it from a technical aspect. Um, and Tales from the Hood is my favorite anthology film of all time. I think it's the pinnacle of anthology. And since that movie came out, which real quick, my neighbor growing up was Rusty Cundiff, the man who directed Tales from the Hood. So I'm really attached to that film, but I've loved the anthologies ever since. And it's like, like ABC's of Death. That's too many for me. But, there's a movie that came out this year called Satanic Hispanics that's fucking fantastic. You know what I mean? So like if it's done right and cohesive and they wrap the story and the theme together, yeah, I have nothing against them. I like them.
All right, well, there you go. So, like I said, I mean, that's kind of the point of having different voices on here, like to hear what everyone has to say about that. So let's get right into it. Obviously, again, VHS Beyond, we've talked a lot about this in our non-spoiler section. Let's get into our spoiler section. So at this point, just so everyone is aware, we are not holding back on anything. If you're in this section, we're going to spoil every single segment and talk about it. So I want to kick things off with our favorite segment from VHS Beyond. And Chuck, I'll throw it to you first. Did you have what was your favorite segment out of all those? And technically, I think there were 5 segments plus the wraparound, and I thought the wraparound story was pretty effective too. If you just cobbled that into one section, I actually thought that was a pretty cool story. So, did you have a favorite segment with VHS Beyond?
Yeah, fur babies, and it's by an insurmountable landslide. Like, because I love weird fucked up movies, and I'm also, and Justin is going to be the same, I love Tusk with my whole entire heart.
I love Tusk.
I think it's just an absolute masterpiece. And when I seen on the poster the Long brothers, so obviously I have Justin Long is the final guy, and I love him. So when I seen that, I was very excited. But that lady in a Kathy Bates-ish type kind of performance she was so creepy and haunting. And what really got me was that little stuffed chihuahua on the mantle that had like those little bug eyes. And I was sitting between everybody. I was sitting with Brian Fierce Ghosts from Scotland. He was hammered. And I couldn't stop laughing at that little fucking dog, but like I knew it was going somewhere. And the body horror and the zip ties of the leather paw pads to that lady's hand, like that's my kind of shit. And I could watch that 100 million times in a row. I love it so much. So good.
It was funny too because I saw on Instagram Justin Long posted about it because we were actually discussing, like, we were kind of curious, like, how much did Justin Long actually have a part in this? Was this like a let me get my brother some shine and like let me put my name attached to it? And then he posted behind the scenes footage where he showed like he was on set. He was obviously a big part of it. And I love that he tagged Kevin Smith because I'm a Tusk guy too. I love Tusk. I'm a big Kevin Smith guy in general, but I love that he tags like, you did something to me on Tusk. It kind of got stuck in my head, and that's where you get fur babies. And I was like, all right, that kind of makes sense. You put him in a walrus outfit for 6 weeks of filming, you're going to get fur babies. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And we spoke to his brother, Christian was there. Justin wasn't, because the guy that produced, what's his name? Justin, Josh Goldblum. That's who produced VHS. He's doing another movie with Justin Long, so he couldn't be there. So we asked Christian, because we kind of thought maybe Justin didn't come, so his brother did get the shine. So it was so funny because we sat there and said, well, let's go ask him questions. And we're like, yeah, I bet you Justin's not here to let his brother, get the shine. So we talked to him for 20 minutes all about his brother Justin and Tusk, which was kind of funny. But he did say that him being traumatized by being in that suit all that time played a major role in Fur Babies. And you could feel that. And I think that was like their homage, to that movie. And Christian Long was such a genuinely nice fucking guy. He was like talking to somebody you met at the grocery store over a head of lettuce, like just genuine and humble. And yeah, I loved it so much.
What about you, Justin? What was your favorite segment of VHS Beyond?
I mean, I've got to echo Chuck. It's fur babies for me personally, because I'm just like, I defend Tusk with my life every day on on TikTok. So as soon as I was like, this is the Long Brothers, and I picked up where it was going, I was like, I'm all in. And at one point during the showing, when that dog comes flying out and starts digging a hole in that guy's chest, I out loud was like, he's fucking digging a hole. And like, I lost it. And like, our entire row was just like, the entire theater was just having an absolute blast. So I mean, for me, it's like not even close, but like, yeah, Fur Babies rips. And then on top of that, you come home, you make your review, and then the crazy dog lady follows me on TikTok and was like, "Oh my God, thank you." I was like, "I love you." And you go on her account and she's got her dog and shit. I'm like, this is the best. I love this lady.
She recorded a video, like, because all the early reactions were coming out, and she recorded this video and then like picked her dog up and like was telling you who her dog was. But like when she ended the video, she ended it like Fur Babies and booped it on the nose. She was like, boop. And I was like, the crazy dog lady's low-key a crazy dog lady, which makes her even better. I was like, that's awesome.
She's
That's
not acting,
hilarious.
she's living it.
100%.
Yeah.
I feel, by the way, this is totally off the subject. I feel like, because we haven't done this on the podcast yet, I feel like we're gonna have to have you guys back when we finally do review Tusk, because that is a favorite of mine. I'm a big Kevin Smith guy. I feel like
Tusk.
we're gonna have to have you back on for Tusk. So, Patrick, I'll throw it to you. What about your favorite segment in VHS Beyond?
My favorite segment turned out to be Stowaway, which is Kate Siegel's directorial debut. Mike Flanagan wrote it. And I didn't look anything up ahead of time. I tried to be as cold as possible. I didn't want to have any sort of biases towards any one of these segments. But that one, to me, it just, and I mentioned this a little bit in the pre-spoiler section. It harkened back to the 1990s, the mid 1990s, when you'd watch like, the Fox channel, and they'd have like a special on UFO sightings. And it captured so much of that 90s VHS look, like truly like titular to the series itself. It felt like something captured on a camcorder. It felt like, am I seeing something real? Is this something that's really happening? It was very well crafted. Was it the most thrilling? No, it's probably the least thrilling. It's probably like the most mellow and slowest, but I like that. I like slow burns, and I just loved where it kept going, and I love that she kept diving deeper and deeper and deeper into this ship, and seeing things that we'll never quite understand, and something about it, man. It just set a mood, it set an atmosphere, it set a tone that I absolutely adored. And then afterwards, I go, oh, that's Kate Siegel and Mike Flanagan. Okay, that made sense. Like they're locked in. They're veteran storytellers and filmmakers, and it really showed on the screen.
Yeah, it's funny. I mentioned this in the non-spoiler section. I don't know if you guys were at all fans when you were growing up, but I said it gave me a bit of an X-Files vibe. Like I said, that it reminded me of like the beginning of X-Files episodes when they would show somebody like in their backyard filming something, and then Mulder and Scully would come to investigate to find out it was real. I was like, that's kind of what that segment reminded me of. Like, I feel like if they tied it, and then at the end of it, Gillian Anderson and David Duchovny just showed up and like, we're here. Like, that would have been a cool way to end it, because that's what it felt like to me, like an X-Files episode.
I agree with that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That would have been very unfair to all the other segments if Mulder and Scully show up and we're like, we're here. Like, you fucks.
Damn.
Yeah. Show off your power, Mike Flanagan. You know you got it.
Amazing.
So for me, I liked a couple of the segments. I mean, I thought all of them were pretty solid, but I think the one that got me the most, just because it really got me into it, was Stork's, because Stork, reminded me of when I was a kid playing Resident Evil, and it felt like Resident Evil, and I loved Resident Evil as a kid. I was not a big video game kid, but that was the one that I loved, was Resident Evil, and it felt like a first-person shooter, and watching them go through the building and the zombies that were in there kind of reminded me a little bit, like the look of them was a little bit zombie, but it also kind of weirdly looked like the aliens from They Live, which I thought was kind of fun. Like they were like almost like detached skull faces. And I just loved the action. Now, I said in the non-spoiler section before you guys were, I said the stork, when they showed the stork, it's like, this is kind of weird. Like it's like an alien stork, but when they show it feeding the baby from its mouth, I was like, all right, you got me. That was pretty cool. So
Absolutely.
I just love the creativity of like literally doing a video game for that little segment, because they've adapted video games into movies before, and a lot of them are not very well done or not very good. Last of Us being an exception, of course, the TV show. But I thought the Resident Evil of it all made that segment. And I just really liked it. I thought it was a really strong segment.
I couldn't agree with you more. When we spoke to them afterwards, it was that's the whole point of it. You know what I mean? Like, because I was like, even like, okay, you're going down this hall, you look up the steps, there's crates in front of it, so it forces you to go through this plastic thing. It was so video game and so pulse pounding. And the thing that made me love it even more is the guy that made the creature was there, and that whole entire stork was done practically, and they were so fucking proud of it, as they should be. But to watch them conversate about this fucked up bird thing that they made was like one of the coolest experiences ever, because that thing is gnarly. Like, I was talking to my buddy today, and he was disappointed that they showed it. Like he said it was scarier when they didn't show it. And I was like, I don't know, man. Like, showing it that thing like exists and feeds that baby was way more scarier to me, like seeing it, because that thing is gnarly. Like, it's terrifying.
That's always such an interesting conversation when, like, just with horror in general. It's like some people just like, oh, I hate that they showed it. Oh, I love that they showed it. Me personally, as soon as I saw that stork, I was like, fuck yes.
Yeah, same.
This is amazing.
When I first saw it, I was like, what the fuck is this? And then when the guy says, oh, he's feeding it from its fucking mouth, I was like, all right, you got me. I was like, that's what got me. Is when they showed that, I was like, all right, that's cool. I was like, you got me there. That was the part I liked.
It's really glorious, like, execution, the execution of and then subversion of expectation. Like, you're expecting just regular old grays, and you're like, nope, these aren't gray aliens. These are like some weird fucked up bird alien that fucking is feeding its young. I fucking love that. And I want to pitch something to the crew right now. Jordan Downey and company that did this movie Stork, I would love to see these guys direct a sequel to Predator 2 specifically. Another urban jungle predator movie with these fuckers. Like, how sick of a movie would that be?
Jordan Downey's going to see this episode, I can assure you that. He's very nice, because he also directed a film called Headhunter. I don't know if you've seen that. Dude, it fucking rips. I spent an hour talking to him about Headhunter, and the special effects guy that did Headhunter did the stork. So it's like tied in, like they're buddies in a team. But 100% when I post this on my Instagram, put him in there, because he's very responsive, and we'll see it. And I would love that as well too. Like, I would love to see a whole fleshed out deal with that POV and the stork and all that shit. I would go see it tomorrow if I could. It was awesome.
Oh no, 100%.
Yeah, that was the one where I was like, when it was over, I was like, I kind of want more. I want to see where this story started, and I want to know where it goes from here. I was like, this is like, I feel like I saw like a segment of the movie. I'm like, I want the rest of the movie now. Give me the rest of that movie. So I really enjoyed that one. Now, listen, part of an anthology, part of the joy or pain, depending on how you look at it, of an anthology, is there's always going to be a segment that doesn't hit quite as much. Now, again, this is just part of movie making, and one of the reasons especially when I first followed you, Justin, was when you gave reviews that you did not like a film. I always appreciate your brutal honesty, because I was like, look, this guy's not just trying to get clicks from movies he loves. He's being honest to say, yeah, this movie sucks. Now, I'm not saying anything in VHS Beyond sucked, but there's always going to be a segment that doesn't land with you as well as others. So I'll fall on the grenade first for this one with me. And it's weird to say this wasn't my favorite, not because I didn't love it, just because it just felt like to me, this was the segment that just didn't feel like the story. And what I'm saying about that is it just didn't feel like a complete story to me. And that to me was Dream Girl. I didn't mind the segment. I actually really liked the effects in that segment. But Patrick and I were talking, on our other segment and off the air, like the paparazzi showing up and looking like cameras from 1995. I'm like, okay, that wouldn't happen. You'd have HD cameras. Like they look like they're carrying camcorders from 1995. But it was the least story built segment to me. It was just like we show up, there's a girl, she's actually like a weird robot, and she just kills a bunch of people. Now, effects wise, it was great, and actually, I'll have some compliments for this section later in our show. But I'm a story guy. I always say I need a good story. I like a good story, and that one just felt like, hey, let's just have a robot kill shit, and there's nothing wrong with that. It just didn't tell me a story. So that was the one that I just kind of like, I love the effects, didn't love the story. So I'll throw it to you, Justin. Do you have a segment that didn't land as much for you as maybe the others?
I was going to say the same one. Honestly, especially, and I've thought about it. I don't know if it was because like it came right after Stork and I was on such a high and where it just like didn't hit as hard. Because you're right. Like, a lot of the effects were great, but the story didn't really bring me in, and that was one that I was like, oh, this is what's going to happen, and I just waited for it to happen. Even though that we talked like on the Q&A, the director of it said that they had like those shots were like the HD camera, like they were shooting the music video, like they were trying to do that kind of stuff to do like more of like a different take on the whole found footage thing. Like they showed parts of the music video and stuff. I appreciate all that, but just overall, that's the one that I was just kind of like, whatever.
Yeah, I'm with you. Chuck, what about you?
Same. And it's not that I didn't like it. Actually, I probably wouldn't have liked it if she wouldn't have ripped that dude's arms off, because that shit was fucking gnarly and I loved it. So like that saved it for me. I think that it's not his fault. I think it's a time constraint thing that blurred the story, because I really do think the deeper meaning behind it was like, I think he couldn't get out of his own way, because I think it was a take on, how AI's like kind of taken over the industry and how people need to beware of that. And, it's going to be, just like the late night with the devil controversy and all the things with AI, it's going to be a thing of beauty. That's going to be the thing that deceives you, like with the AI. And I think that's the statement that it was trying to make. I just don't think that within the time constraint, it was able to convey that message. So like, I think the intention is really good and the idea is good. I just think it failed a little in the execution, but major props to him, because it's the first Indian found footage film ever made. Like he fought to make that. And like, I respect all of that, but like sometimes things just don't translate well. So like it is, I feel the weakest for me. Yes.
Patrick, what about you?
As always, I'm the fucking lone voice of dissent. First of all, I did actually I understand what everybody's saying about Dreamgirl, but I did love, and I thought Damon, that thematically it was on brand, because it was about like this, because I think they never really answer what she is. Like she's half sentient, half robot, and I was like, maybe she's even from another world. Like they kind of like play with that a little bit. Again, like Chuck says, they didn't get a ton of time to really delve into it. That one I think could have been expanded and shorten the front of it and bring me more of the back end. The one that did not hit with me is Fur Babies.
Don't you say I knew you were going to say it. I fucking knew you were going to say it.
Listen, but actually for the reason Damon gave for Dreamgirl is, to me, Fur Babies does not feel like it belongs in this anthology. It does not feel like it has anything to do with otherworldly planets. It does not feel like it does, and it has anything to do with technology. If you wanted to do VHS laugh your ass off, that should have been the fucking the anchor film. You know what I mean? Like it totally, it lines up with that style. Like this I knew it blew the house down at Fantastic Fest. I'm sure it would probably blow the house down at Comic-Con for sure. It's just that kind of movie that plays for crowds really well. But to me, I was like, it's the only segment here that I'm like, how is this Beyond? How is it Beyond? It's just she's a mad scientist, okay, but everything else sort of had something to deal with technology and the supernatural, and Fur Babies did not.
I agree with you
You're
100%.
not wrong at
And
all.
on the same note, that's kind of why I love it, because Fur Babies can do whatever the fuck it wants to do. So like they just threw it in there. But I agree, because it didn't have like that theme. I mean, you had an alien or an extraterrestrial or some kind of, like technology.
Sci-fi,
Yeah, it did. It almost, I mean, I've seen a review today that said it almost feels like they threw it in there because of who made it. And that's very possible that they did that to put the name on the poster and get it. But at least I found it incredibly entertaining.
It could have anchored if they do like VHS, like I know this is a terrible name, but like VHS Animal, like they did Cocaine Bear, we got Meth Gator. Like, couldn't they have waited and thrown this in there? Yeah, Crackoon. Couldn't they have waited and done like a VHS Animal segment and let that like anchor the whole thing? Because I think that would have fit better, much like Tusk. Like you could do a whole animal series of VHS.
Yeah.
They're talking about making it into a feature-length film. Like Christian said they want to explore it into like a big thing. Like, please, somebody give that man millions of dollars to make
all in.
Length for, yes, please.
All
please.
Please. Give me 14 of them. I don't give a fuck.
The ASPCA and Sarah McLachlan will be all over that fucking movie.
Next segment we do is called Face Huggables, and this is a segment where we basically just give our praise for parts of the movie that we loved. And it can be one segment, it can be the entire movie, but just kind of one thing you loved about VHS Beyond. And again, it could be anything. It could be the cinematography, it could be the effects. So, Chuck, I'll throw it to you first. Do you have just a favorite overarching moment or favorite overarching part of VHS Beyond?
I'm gonna stay away from Fur Babies because I have too many in that to do. But the thing that got me the most, the two things that got me the most were Live and Let Dive. And that's when they were in the plane and you didn't really know what was going on. And then that 3-toed alien hand hit that window and that got me. Like, I was like, oh shit. It had like those little sucker things on it. And then when he was in the truck and that head thing fucking popped through the door, like, jump scares usually don't get me. And that really fucking got me. I was like, oh shit. So like that, just because that's why I'm watching horror movies. I want to be scared. I want to jump. And like, those were the two things that really, really did it for me. So I was really happy about that. That's my favorite.
What about you, Justin?
I was going to just say that I love like the risks that they decided to take. And I was going to use Live and Let Die as the example to that skydiving scene when that 3-toed alien thing, and you're like, oh shit, like we're in the middle of something crazy and the plane explodes and they're falling to, like, I'm like, how did they shoot this? Like, they just dropped some guy out of a plane and said, fall. Like, what the fuck? And like the fact that like they're still shooting as it, like how that scene was shot. And then again, just my own personal privilege of being able to sit front row and see that thing on the big screen. I can't think of another VHS segment that has made me feel like in awe. And like, that was just fantastic.
Patrick, what about you?
I will echo the fellas on this because Live and Let Dive is a very unique experience in found footage. It's like, yeah, I haven't seen skydiving found footage before. That's fucking rad. Like, it's fucking crazy. I'm gonna be straight up. I hated that group of friends like immediately, and I was like, cool, I can't wait to see these people get ripped to shreds because they fucking are annoying. But I was like, how's this gonna work out? How's this gonna go? Are they really gonna fucking have this skydiving like horror sequence? And they do it. And then they get to the ground, and then I was talking with Damon where like they obviously were like, hey, most of the budget's not going to be that big. So let's shoot in this orange grove. It makes total sense. We'd land in an orange grove and you get all of the fucking action out of it. And the one thing I fucking loved about this segment was when he's in the truck and he gets sucked into the spaceship. The effects, the perspective, the way they put you into that moment, I was like, it felt fucking real. I was like, this is what it feels like to be in your pickup truck in the middle of fucking nowhere and to get zapped into a fucking spaceship. And I felt it in that moment. The craft is super important to me. And craft in that moment was a fucking plus. On top of all of that, Live and Let Dive is a perfect example of how you make sense of keeping the camera rolling in found footage. Normally, and you guys know because you watch even more found footage than I do, normally they have to make up some dumb excuse while they're talking about why that camera's rolling. These guys had their GoPro strapped, they were ready to dive. They can't even think about turning the GoPro off. They're too busy running for their fucking lives. So it makes total sense why that video never stopped rolling. Bravo. This is a fantastic fucking segment.
Agreed.
So for me, and I know every segment had its own director, had its own team behind it, but I thought what impressed me most, and I've only seen now, I admitted this earlier before you guys were on, I said I've only ever seen the original VHS because I'm just not a huge Anthology guy, and I did enjoy. I mean, when you look at that lineup they had with Ty West and you know all the lineup they had in that original VHS, it's pretty remarkable. All the filmmakers they got on that first one, Radio Silence guys, it was a pretty remarkable list. But what I was most impressed by overall with all the segments was the effects. I mean, you're working with no money here. You have literally no money to work on this thing, and I thought like from the jump with Stork, I was like, damn, like these are really good effects. Like when they're buzzsawing through people and they're shooting the zombies and blood splatter, I was like, this actually looks really, really well. And then even though I didn't love Dream Girl, even though I didn't love that segment, the effects were great. Like that was what saved that segment. The story didn't get me, but the effects did. And again, on through, even down to Stowaway, which I think Patrick might have a point that I feel like maybe Kate Siegel and Mike Flanagan are like, give us less money because we want everyone else to have more of the budget. But even when those like nanite things came down and were like, attaching it to her finger and healing her, I was like, that looked pretty good. Like again, because I think you guys know, like when digital effects started really taking into horror back in like the early 2000s, mid 2000s, when it really started taking over, there are some really bad digital effects in those movies. Like I think now we're getting back into where a lot of horror filmmakers are back to practical effects, and you think about what Damien Leone does with Terrifier and some of the other movies that are out there now where it's back to all being practical effects. Now again, I don't know if there's how much digital effects are in here, but overall I thought, man, for what is ultimately a found footage, low budget movie, the effects were pretty goddamn good. I was like, this is really impressive.
Yeah, I even asked about the Stork because I originally thought the Stork was like digitally brushed up, like touched up, and it had zero digital effects. And to real quick to piggyback on what Patrick said, when he was in that truck and he got sucked into the thing, that was the first alien abduction scene that I've seen that made me feel like, and it was reminiscent of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Like that's what I thought of in the theater. Like I couldn't stop thinking about Richard Dreyfuss. And then there was all those other little throwbacks in there because I think Kate's Stowaway, I think there was a lot of homage to 2001 in there with like just the claustrophobia of the situation. Like that's the one the most I'm intrigued by seeing like this big long fleshed out story from, because it left me wanting so much more. But yeah, the effects for I can't imagine. I don't know what they made that whole movie for, but it wasn't a lot.
600 grand is what I have in front of me right now.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, the only thing that on the top of my head that was like CGI was like the alien in Live and Let Die when he's running around. That was very obvious to me, and that was like my least favorite part of that segment. But saying that, it still looked pretty damn good. Like, especially for like the small budget that they had. Like it wasn't going to look pristine, but like it was still like pretty solid.
Yeah, you have to give them credit for being ballsy to do a full CGI alien in the daylight. that is your greatest risk. That is your greatest walking the plank tightrope moment as a filmmaker when you go, I'm going to do my CG thing in broad daylight. Hopefully it looks good. I mean, even Marvel fucks that shit up sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard to do that.
Do you know what the? Go ahead, Damon.
No, good, Chuck. Go ahead.
I was going to say, do you know what the coolest thing about the whole entire movie is? And this made me love it even more. Is when we were at the premiere, all the directors were there. And that night with us was the first time that they seen all the other segments. They didn't know what they were. They knew what the names of them were, but they didn't know. Like, they didn't see them. And they all spoke individually about, they didn't want to. They didn't want to make something that was cohesive with the other thing. Like, they had 3 topics. Here's your money. Go make a fucking movie. So, like, they experienced it with us, which I thought was really cool because, like, Kate spoke and she said, I don't want to make your movie. Like, I don't want any influence about what you're doing because I don't want that to influence like my vision. I want to make my own thing. And for how, except for Fur Babies, how cohesively they all thematically ran together.
Yeah.
Was just brilliant to me to have that like little backstory of it, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, and to your point, talk about filming during the daytime. It's a totally different movie. But I interviewed the director and cinematographer from Strange Darling, which was one of our favorite films this year. And when I talked to them, I said, I love that you guys film so much of this in the daytime because a lot of these like thrillers you film at night because you want to cheat, hide in shadows, hide behind things, because that's how you do it. And Giovanni Ribisi, who did the cinematography, he immediately pointed to the camera. He's like, you got it. Because like they wanted specifically to not fall back into the old trope of doing things at night, hiding things with shadows. He's like, we specifically wanted to have very well lit buildings, very well lit scenes, so you didn't see the next thing coming because you're just expecting it when it's dark out. That's just like a typical thing in a thriller or horror film. And so I did like that they did that in Live and Let Die. Like, it's all in the daylight. There's no hiding with the shadows or anything. So I did appreciate the ingenuity behind that. Now, not everything is going to be great about a film. And our next segment we call It's Giving Part 5. And I'll turn this over to Patrick. He always explains what It's Giving Part 5 means.
It's Giving Part 5, in contrast to a face huggable, is, Part 5s of our favorite franchises don't always fucking hit. We're talking about Dream Child here, Friday the 13th, A New Beginning. No, they don't always land, right? So sometimes there's things in your films that don't always land with everybody. Was there anything that you guys found in the overall or in VHS that just didn't land for you?
The whole series or just this one?
No, I'm sorry. Excuse me. VHS Beyond is what I meant.
I will arc back to your point about Fur Babies. That was, even though that's my favorite segment, I felt the same way that with it being VHS Beyond, I feel like there's an argument to be made how it does fit, but overall it does feel a bit out of place. And because I went into the film expecting each segment to be outer space, alien, something. And the fact that that one wasn't, I think makes it stand out. But like, it doesn't quite fit. So that would be my literal only critique about Fur Babies and pretty much the entire film, really. That would be my biggest like red flag.
It's the Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. It's one of my favorite Halloween films, but it's the only Halloween film without Michael Myers. You can see I actually have the Halloween 3 masks hanging out right behind my shoulder. I love Halloween 3, but it's the only one in that franchise that doesn't have Michael Myers. If it was just Season of the Witch, I think people would have loved that film. But because it didn't have Michael Myers, people were like, fuck that movie. I agree. Like, Fur Babies was just the one that's like, this doesn't feel... It's like, what's that thing from, what was it? It was a Sesame Street. Like, one of these things is not like the others. That was very much Fur Babies. Chuck, what about you? Is there one thing you kind of bumped up against a little bit in VHS Beyond?
First and foremost, you're my kind of guy because Halloween 3 Season of the Witch is arguably the best in the entire franchise, and I'll fight that every day because it's a fucking great movie. No, I mean, besides Fur Baby's not standing out, like my overall take from the whole movie, even though, I had like recency bias seeing it in the theater, I watched it again. I loved it just as much. I think it revitalized that series. I think like it started all like it's all gonna happen again. I think it was that strong of an entry. I think it's the best entry other than the first one. Um, and it's just new life, and I think it's going to crush. Like I would have to say by now it might be the most downloaded or watched thing on Shutter so far because people are really hype about it. They're already working on another one per the producer. Yeah, I don't really have, just that like the Dream Girl didn't hit, and there was like a couple, like I could nitpick the shit out of it, but why? It's an anthology found
It's
footage movie that fucking rips. That's good enough for me. Yeah, I loved
it's
it.
it's one of those things where honestly, if you talk to like a pretty decent like VHS franchise fan, the last 3 films, there's been a segment here and there that, hits or whatever. Ratma was great, but like overall, they're just kind of like, just hang it up, man.
Right.
Like we're just like, just hang it up. It's dry. So I didn't expect this film to hit as like consistent and as like hard as it did. So yeah, I agree. I think VHS suddenly has brand new life for sure.
Damon, what say you?
I talked about this in the non-spoiler section, so I'll bring it up again here. And it's just it again. I understand why they do it. It just drives me nuts. We are in 2024. We all have iPhones or Samsung Galaxies or Pixel, whatever. The video looking like it's from 1995 camcorders. We got to stop with this with the found footage movies. I understand, especially in Mike Flan or in Keith Siegel's segment. I get it because I think that was supposed to be of that time period, and as I said, it kind of felt like an X-Files segment. But there were some segments in the other ones where I'm just like, stop. We all have HD video. We do. We all have iPhones. They all shoot good video. There's some segments where it's like, especially the paparazzi one. That one's the one that drove me the absolute battiest in Dreamgirl because I'm like, you're paparazzi. You're supposed to sell this stuff for money. No one's going to buy your fuzzy, out of focus stuff. And I know they joked at the beginning that something was out of focus, but I'm like, it's still out of focus on an iPhone. It's not that hard. Like, stop trying to cheat with the whole grainy camera footage because we're in 2024. Like, there's no such thing as grainy camera footage anymore unless you're zooming in on something from like 800 yards away. There's
right.
just not. It just doesn't happen anymore. So stop with the grainy footage.
Now, for me, obviously, I'm the least least fan of found footage of this group. But I gotta say, I was struggling to find something that was giving part 5 for me. And for me to say that is a fucking raging endorsement for VHS Beyond. I had a real problem finding a problem with this movie. Fur Babies was my problem with this movie because I was like, it just doesn't fit. This doesn't fit in this, and that's again nitpicking, right? It's this movie fucking it's doing really it's a really fucking well put together movie. And I'm with those fans who were like, hey, maybe VHS, it's time to hang it up. Beyond said, nah, we got a new fucking thing.
Yep.
So I'm gonna be a little shit, and my only face huggable will be like, hey, how about the next VHS is not found footage? Now all the found footage people are gonna come for my head like they always fucking do. But like, you've shown us that you can step this shit way the fuck up. And so like now, I'm with Chuck, and like I will echo this 100%. I do, even though I'm not a fan of found footage, it's so important to the industry. It's so important to new filmmakers and new voices. So I'm not dogging it at all. But VHS Beyond showed me that VHS indeed can go beyond. So let's go beyond and let's try to get outside of the template. I want to see a VHS anthology that has no limits. I would love to see what that looks like. I would love to see the budget on the next one quadruple. And by the way, and still give it to independent filmmakers. Don't line it up with a bunch of famous filmmakers because now we got the budget. No. Give it to the Chloe Okunos. Give it to the John Dowds and all the Jordan Downeys and all these folks that are still trying to come up. Be like, here's your reward for how bad fucking ass you've been for us all these years. Like the next VHS goes hard, like goes big, goes huge. I know that goes against the grain of the entire series, but you guys just said it yourselves. The series was getting tired. So now we can play with different directions. Now there's a fire lit under our asses. So let's try it out.
I think that's a really cool idea, and to the graininess, like to stop doing the graininess, because I agree with that. Like, I get that it's VHS and you want it to look like this cold case from 1982 when you had a 400-pound camera on your shoulder from fucking Sears or Kmart. Like, I get that. But found footage has taken a step. Like, there's not a lot of them, but like Missing, Searching, Host, like those movies rip, and they have genuine tension and scare, and they're all done on computer screens, telephones. I'd like to see a VHS that was like done like that through security cams or, some kind of thing like that, because those movies are very, very, very effective. The timeline, the text bubbles on the screen, like it keeps you it's just like sitting on it. It's just like taking a shit on a Monday morning when you're scrolling through your feed, because you're watching it all in real time. So like when you get those bubbles and the texts and the FaceTimes and all that stuff, it feels so intense because it's so real. So I'd like to see a VHS like do that. It would be really cool.
I'm so glad you mentioned. I'm so glad you mentioned Missing. That movie fucking rips. I love that movie. That was such a good movie.
I like Searching. I think Searching's just as good. I think they're both great.
Yeah, that was a great movie. Great movie. Yeah. So, like I said, and yeah, I think the other one. The only other problem. Here's my only other criticism is you guys. This one set the bar so high. I've only ever seen the other VHS. Now, like I feel like you can't go back and watch the other ones because everyone's like, yeah, this series wasn't great, and I was like, all right, I don't want to watch any of the other ones because this one, I enjoyed the first one, and this one was really, really good. So I'm like, yeah, I don't think I want to go back and revisit the other ones because that usually works. You're like, ooh, let me go watch the other ones. Now I feel like maybe I shouldn't.
I think VHS 2 is pretty solid as well.
It is.
But like past that, like
when they got into the numbers, the 94, the 96, and the 98, those ones aren't very. There's like one real solid segment in each one of them that could have just been one movie and cut out the rest of it. But yeah, there's no need to go back. Two, I would recommend watching two. If you liked one and you like Beyond, I think you'll like two. Two's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to our next segment. One of our favorite segments, of course, which is Best Gore. And to its credit, there was a fuck ton of gore in this movie, and I appreciate that. I am a gore guy. I am a Terrifier guy. I love a good gore. So, Chuck, I'll throw it to you first. Did you have a favorite gore moment in VHS Beyond?
It's from Dreamgirl, ripping that guy's arms off on the fucking side of the road. It was gnarly, and I didn't expect it, like, because there was nothing really up until that point. And that attack and the severing of the arms, I fucking loved it. I thought it was great, and it wasn't even watching it. The sound effects of the tearing is what did it for me, because they were like so peak, like you just felt like limbs ripping off. I don't know what that really sounds like, but it sounds like that, and I love it. That scene was it was super rad.
I'll just go ahead and jump in and say and echo, that was mine too. Ripping the fucking arms off and then ripping the guy's face off back to back. I was like, that fucks. Like, give me that all day. Like I said, the story didn't work because there wasn't really a great story in that one, but the effects kind of saved that segment. Agreed. And her just straight ripping the dude's arm off, and then literally you see her like sawing around his face and just pulling his face off as he's screaming. I'm like, all right, that's pretty. And then she goes out wearing his face. I was like, all right,
pretty sick.
That was the one that kind of saved it for me.
Agreed.
Justin, what about you?
Besides like the entire Stork segment just going fucking balls to the wall hard, the one that sticks out to me is the dude's decapitated head hanging from his parachute in Live and Let Dive. I was like, that's fucking sick. Yeah. Like they just come around the corner and his head's just like hanging on to this parachute. I was like, hell yeah, brother.
What was the guy's name? I can't remember what he kept saying. He kept saying his name. He's like, "Hey, where are you? Where are you? Hey, what's going
Logan.
on?" He keeps Logan. He's like,
Yeah.
Logan, what's going on?" And then he pulls away, and his head's just decapitated on the parachute. I was like, "Damn, that was pretty good." That was the other one. That was the other one. I loved that scene.
Yeah, love it.
Patrick, what about you?
I mean, listen, a good decapitation, honestly, in any movie, a good decapitation will get your eyes wide. Like, it really does fucking work. And I was gonna say Tara's rampage in Dreamgirl, like that 100% is a fucking wild scene. But I'm gonna give it to the bird alien massacre. Like, it's just so fun. It was such a fucking video game scene. Like, you're about to break through the door to the final boss's level and you got to go through hell to get there. So much blood flying, guns blasting, bodies flying this way, guts going that way, brains getting splattered, heads getting split open. It was fucking so badass, dude. Like, I'm following Jordan Downey anywhere he goes, dude. Whatever he wants to put out there, I want to fucking see it. The guy gets it.
I was so glad in that segment when they're trying to get upstairs and he's just like, "Hold on, go get the chainsaw." And I was like, "Yes, we get to see the chainsaw." I was like, way to reincorporate that back into the movie. I was like, way to go on
Chekhov's
that
chainsaw.
Because none of us forgot about it when we were watching.
Nope.
Yep.
I love it. Our next segment we did is called Best Anthology or Favorite Anthology. Now, I opened this one a little wider because there's great, actually, anthology TV series to go along. Now, this can stretch out beyond horror. We talked about this. Like, Fargo is an incredible anthology TV series. American Horror Story is an anthology. Of course, there's anthology horror, plenty of those. So, what is, just like your favorite overall anthology? So, Chuck, I'll throw it to you first. Do you have a favorite anthology movie or TV series?
I think Channel Zero is the greatest horror show ever made. Hill House and Midnight Mass would be behind that, but Channel Zero, every season being something different, falls under anthology for me. And I think it's the most criminally slept on horror show ever made. And I think I love every season of that show. Like, I talk about it on my TikTok constantly. Like, if I could throw it in a list and mention it and bring it up, I do, because it's so fucking good. I don't know if you guys seen it, but I hope that if you didn't, that you rectify it, because it's a 10 out of 10 all the way across the board. Love it.
Was that originally on Sci-Fi and then it went on Shudder? Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
Well, first season was Sci-Fi, then it dropped to some own network or something, and then Shudder picked it up, and then they're gonna start making them again, which I think is super fucking rad, because it gets a lot of, I mean, it might not get love like publicly, but there's people on Reddit constantly talking about theories about Channel Zero. Like, it has affected a lot of people. It's so good.
There you go. Justin, what about you? Do you have a favorite anthology?
When I get asked this question, it's hard not to think back on Trick or Treat. Like, I fucking love that film. I've like, especially when it comes to like October and Halloween, I just think it's like quintessential. Like, I just think it's Sam and like the rules of Halloween, and I think it's a perfect example of having different stories that at the end it all wraps around and the whole thing was connected. I think it's just fucking sick.
That, it was funny. I say I'm not like a huge anthology guy, and I'm typically not. Trick or Treat is a really good one. That is a really good anthology. Like, that's one of the horror anthologies, because I'd heard about it. I didn't see it when it first came out, but I heard about it. Everyone's like, "You got to see this, you got to see it." And I watched it, and I was like, all right, I dig this a lot. And now I own the Blu-ray, and I am a Trick or Treat guy. That definitely was.
It's actually like the one, like, when I heard that they're possibly doing a sequel, I'm like, can you not? Like,
right, leave it
like,
alone.
like 100%, like, can you not? Like, and I feel so weird because I'm usually the guy that's like, oh, just let him fucking,
Leave it alone.
The original's there. That's all fine, but like, just, man, it's been so long. Just leave it be. Just let it have its perfect one and done. Sam rules. Just leave it alone.
I mean, Sam made it into stores, into Spirit Halloween 15 years after that movie came out. Like that's how much impact that first
Dude,
film has.
Universal,
Yeah.
he had his own scare zone at Universal Halloween Horror Nights like
That's
3
what I'm
or
saying, but
4
it
years
wasn't
ago.
popular
Like, yeah,
when it came out.
no.
It was like forgotten about, and then it had like the internet, like it had such a fucking research. Leave it alone.
That's
my
why we
biggest
have that segment.
Yeah, that's why. Like we talked about this a while back. There's one of our favorite sci-fi sort of horror films is Attack the Block, and I love Attack the Block. And now they're doing a sequel. And I'm kind of like, I don't know about this. Like it's been like 15 years, and I don't know, man. Like I'm just scared because that original's so good. I'm just like, I mean, no, it doesn't.
Leave it
It doesn't
alone.
necessarily. It doesn't necessarily fuck it up if you make a new one. But I'm kind of like, you know. Like, don't you want to have a good memory like Independence Day? Do we really need resurgence? Like, we don't.
right.
We don't need resurgence. We don't need that. Patrick, what about you? What's your favorite anthology?
So my pick was the original Creepshow 1 and 2. I had to put them together. They are a very important part of the fabric why I'm a fucking weirdo today. I watched those things on loop as a child. And it's just like every color, and by the way, some of the most dynamic directors in horror lent their hands to these things. It makes me the weirdo I am. It's why I like slime and guts and gore and creepiness and sludge and fucking weird shit. I love the creep shows, but I need to make an addendum because Chuck brought something up that's super important to me. Tales from the Hood is the last anthology to scare the living shit out of me. It's a fucking terrifying movie. And I think we've even maybe touched on it before on the show. I may be repeating myself. It's the last time I could remember being scared. Like the kind of scared that a kid gets when he's watching a horror movie he shouldn't be watching. Because it touches on real shit. I grew up in a black neighborhood. I grew up learning about civil rights. It's in my fucking blood to know this history. And it's woven perfectly through all these stories, but it's also entertaining. It's not a fucking preachy movie. It's a bad fucking ass movie. It's still one of the greatest anthologies that's ever been done. So when Chuck brought that up, I was like, there's no way I'm not going to give some fucking flowers to Tales from the Hood because it's one of the best anthologies that ever was.
And it's sad too because it was culturally relevant then. But you know, that was 95 and almost 30 years later, like it's even more important than it ever was. And you know, Mr. Jordan Peele has been put on record, like it's quoted on record that there would be no Jordan Peele if it wasn't for Rusty Cundiff and Tales from the Hood, because every studio they didn't want to make that movie. They didn't want to make an African American fucking horror movie. So he just made the fucking movie, you know what I mean? So like it has way more meaning than just being an anthology. Like that's should be in the Smithsonian or something.
100%.
It's a very, very powerful piece.
That's actually we talked about it before. We've never reviewed it on the show, but I love that one as well. I've always been a big Clarence Williams fan. He's in that movie. David Allen Greer, who I grew up with on In Living Color. Like it's a really, really good film. I don't think that gets nearly enough credit for how good it is. Like it's just like one of the, if you talk to a hardcore horror fan, they know Tales from the Hood. And that is a really, really good anthology. So Patrick and I, we were coming up with these segments for the show, and originally I told Patrick, I said, well, I think mine's going to be True Detective, because the first season of True Detective is probably my favorite season of television ever. I've watched it like 9 times. It's one of the best pieces of storytelling ever made. But I switched my answer coming into tonight, and I'm going to go with a TV series again, but I'm going to go with Black Mirror. Because Black Mirror is, and it kind of fits into our theme of sci-fi tonight. There are definitely horror segments, there are sci-fi segments, and much like any anthology, there are some segments of Black Mirror that are not my favorite. There are some during the season that I kind of skip over. But I remember how I heard about Black Mirror, and this is weird. This is how I heard about it. I was listening to Kevin Smith podcast. He used to do a show called Smodcast with Scott Mosier, his former producing partner, and they were talking about the segment, the national anthem, which is where the British Prime Minister is basically blackmailed into doing really heinous acts with a pig. And Kevin Smith and Scott Mosier were talking about this segment. They were cracking up and they were like, this is so fucked up. This is so wild. And I was like, how can I not watch this? Like, how can I not seek this out now and watch it? And I did. It was just as wild as you can imagine. And I've been a fan ever since. And the reason why my answer switched to Black Mirror for the podcast because I love, listen, San Junipero, which is a real super popular episode. I really like that episode. There's so many good ones. USS Callister is a great episode, but the one that got Hang the DJ is another one. But the one that got me and the one that made me think of this for horror, and I don't know how much you guys have seen the most recent season 6, which came out in 2023, but there's a segment called Lock Henry. It's the second segment of the new season of Black Mirror. I watched that. Now, they've talked about, there's one segment from earlier in the show that Robert Downey Jr. bought, and he wanted to make a movie out of it. If you've never seen Lock Henry, and again, the good thing about Black Mirror, you don't have to see anything else. You literally just watch that segment. Right. It is a horror segment. And I watched it and I was like, this needs to be made into a full-length movie. This fucking thing was so good. And it actually got me scared a couple of times when they were watching old footage of murders. And I was like, holy shit, this fucked me up. Like, it was really dark and very ominous and almost didn't feel Black Mirror in a way because there was no technology really involved necessarily. It was just a straight up horror story. And I was like, take Lock Henry and make that into a fucking movie. I want to see a full-length version of that. So for me, it's Black Mirror. There's at least 2 or 3 segments every season that I'm like, I can't stop talking about. So that's for me is Black Mirror.
Hell yeah.
Have any of you guys seen Lock Henry? Have any of you guys seen that episode?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, yeah, rips.
Black Mirror almost caused whenever they weren't going to make any more of them. I mean, that was one of the biggest uprisings we've had in a long time of people they were on change.org with 500,000 signatures in 2 days because said they were going to cancel Black Mirror. It's so good. Yeah.
So good.
Yeah, it's really good. All right, now, next segment, again, this is separate from VHS Beyond, but this is outside, being honest, Fur Babies is not the one that's in here, but this is all about alien, sci-fi, that kind of film, which is the whole point of VHS Beyond. So I wanted to ask everyone your favorite alien invasion film, because I think we all grew up with those, right? We all grew up in some form or fashion. I always talk about, when I was a kid seeing Independence Day in the theater, what an experience that was. So, Justin, I'll throw it to you first. Do you have a favorite alien invasion film? And again, doesn't have to be horror.
I think of 3 when I think of alien invasion. You bring up Independence Day. That was a staple growing up, but then I think Mars Attacks is fantastic.
Fucking love Mars Attacks.
Fucking love Mars Attacks, dude. Yeah. But the one that this might be weird, but the one that just sticks out to me that always just is Signs. I fucking love Signs. We were talking about in our chat last week or so, and there's just so many scenes of that movie because I was in sixth grade when that came out. And it was just that was one of the very early top 5 movies around that time that just scared the shit out of me. Iconic scene at the birthday party and stuff, but the scene in the basement when Graham is telling it, his the birth stories and all that, and the aliens are breaking into the house and Windows is breaking their, you just hear them coming in. That scene sits with me till right now. It just sits there.
You haven't heard the non-spoiler section where we actually talked about Signs, because during the segment I said, "Vamonos, children, vamonos," because that scene when the alien pops out is so good. I love that scene. Chuck, what about you? Do you have a favorite alien invasion film?
I think Fire in the Sky is the most terrifying alien movie ever made.
So good.
It just does. It has everything I want from a movie like that. It feels real. When that came out, I was old enough to understand, but that was it had impact like the Blair Witch. It felt so fucking real, that could exist. The Fourth Kind felt like that as well too, but that was more hokier. And if it's not Fire in the Sky, it's Close Encounters, because that movie's just it's a flawless masterpiece. Just give it what it is. I also have a huge. I'm a big Richard Dreyfuss guy. The dude can do no wrong for me. But yeah, Fire in the Sky is my alien abduction movie of choice. I love it.
And that goes
One of
right
my-
into me. Fire. Yeah, no, go ahead, Damon.
No, I was gonna say I'm a big Richard Dreyfuss. One of my dog's names is Brody, and I named him
awesome.
after Brody from Jaws because I love you. And our other dog is Hopper, which we named after Stranger Things, but we also joke about Hooper. So I'm a big Jaws guy. So yeah, I'm a big Richard Dreyfuss guy too. Patrick, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm just echoing Chuck because my pick was Fire in the Sky as well. One of my like genuine fears as a kid, and one of the reoccurring nightmares I had as a kid was being abducted by aliens. 100%, probably because of how much like crypto and cryptozoology and weird, unsolved mystery shit I was like absorbing as a child. I was genuinely scared of being abducted by aliens. And when that movie came out, it confirmed every one of my fears.
Yeah.
And you're just like, fuck yes, dude. Yes, it should be a terrifying experience. I love all the hopeful movies, all the fun Mac and Me, E.T. I grew up on all that shit. I love all that shit. But I was genuinely terrified of being abducted by the Greys, and Fire in the Sky confirmed the fear. And I was like, yes, dude. And it's just a fucking perfectly made movie.
It is. It really is.
Fire in the Sky is that movie. I remember when I was a kid, people were like, that movie will fuck you up. I remember people telling me that when I was a kid, and I was like, this movie must be amazing. And it is amazing. But I always remember people being like, that movie's so fucked up, it will fuck you up. And I was like, really? Okay, I feel like I need to seek this out. So my real answer, because we're going to go 2 for 2, my real answer is Signs. I love Signs. That's one of my all-time favorite movies, and I think that probably is, outside of Unbreakable, which is probably my favorite M. Night Shyamalan movie. That would be number 2. Signs is amazing. But I'll veer off a little bit just to give her a different one. And I'm actually going with a film that I didn't see until more recently. It's not horror, but it is great sci-fi, and that's Edge of Tomorrow with Tom Cruise.
Fucking rips.
I was a late arrival to that thing, but when I saw it, I was like, now I see why everyone loves this movie. That movie was so much fun. The great Bill Paxton, one of my all-time favorite actors in that movie. That movie was so much fun and so creative and so just it was a blast. And I know they've talked about for like a decade now doing a sequel, and I know they just recently did a deal where Tom Cruise is working with Warner Brothers again, and like they're talking about will they do a sequel. I'm like, I don't know if we need a sequel, but I want more of that world because that movie rips. I love Edge of Tomorrow.
Love it.
Great fucking film.
It's a good one.
Especially if you get in an all dark room with like 5.1 channel and back speaker like that. The sound design in that movie is top tier. I love that movie. I love Tom Cruise, but not as a person, but like if Tom Cruise is going, if anybody's going to make a sequel to a movie that's 20 years old, he's already proven that he's the guy to do it.
Oh yeah, no,
Totally.
100%.
Because he just doesn't make shitty movies. Like they might not be your kind of movie. Like you might not like the movies that he makes, but they're not shitty movies. Like he makes good movies.
I'm another Tom Cruise stan myself, dude.
Yeah.
Like he gives a shit. He's like us. He fucking loves movies.
Yeah.
So he sits in that theater and obsesses over how every little sound is going to buzz around your fucking head, how every fucking edit
He's
hits.
jumping off of fucking buildings. Like that's how much he cares.
I love it,
He's
dude.
insane.
I fucking love it. I love
There
it.
is no world where the Top Gun sequel should have been as good as it was. It was 30 years or whatever after 40 years after the original. That's why I'm like, you know what? Unlike, and I agree with you, Justin, like do not do Trick or Treat. Just leave it alone. The first one's a classic. Don't mess with it. But yeah, like Tom Cruise gets it right. Like he got it right with Top Gun. I feel like if somebody could get Edge of Tomorrow right, do it. Although I will say, what was the Live Die Repeat was the name they were originally going to call it. Dude, that's a much better name. I will say that's a much better name than Edge of Tomorrow. Live Die Repeat is a much cooler name than Edge of Tomorrow.
Well, that can be the sequel's name because
there you go.
it's proven. Let's do it.
Yeah. All right, last segment. This is what we always close out with, and this is important because we're all horror fans. So we always ask, is it scary? So when you kind of encapsulate VHS Beyond as an entire movie, and again, it's an anthology. Some segments are going to be better. Some segments are going to be scarier. So, Chuck, I'll throw it to you first. At the end of the day, VHS Beyond, is it scary?
No. Like it has scary elements, but like overall, like if somebody says I want to watch something scary tonight, it wouldn't be my choice. Like it has scary elements. There's things that are unnerving, but is it scary? No, for me, no. Like it's very well made. I loved it. Not knocking it, but like I don't think it's scary. Like it's alarming. It makes you jump a little bit, but like I'm already over alien abductions. Like at this point, I welcome it. Like, please take me. If you want to, please
Shit.
take me and report to the IRS. Like, I'm good with that. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, is it scary? No, I don't think it's scary, but it's really fucking entertaining, and you're gonna have a blast with it.
Justin, what about you? You're just as fucked up and desensitized as we are. I know you are from your TikTok. So what about you? Were you scared?
No, I would echo Chuck and say there's definitely a couple of jump scares, but I don't necessarily the same way. Like if somebody said I want to watch a scary film, I wouldn't recommend. There are some like previous VHSs that I think are more like scary. This has some scary elements, but I wouldn't say it's like scary. It's too much of a spectacle, I think, to be scary. It's yeah. No.
Yeah, I love sci-fi. I'm a big sci-fi guy, but it's hard for me to look at a lot of sci-fi and find great horror in sci-fi. Like I love sci-fi horror. Like we talk about Alien on here, like it's the greatest creation to mankind. But to me, it's a little harder. Like I think sci-fi is good. I think horror is good. It's hard. It is hard to combine them and make them both scary at the same time. So, Patrick, I'll throw it to you. Is it scary? I think we're 2 for 2 and saying not scary. Are you 3 for 3?
Let's go 3 for 3 because ultimately, I think with sci-fi, there's some interesting little disconnect. Like we talked about Fire in the Sky, it feels so organic and so down to earth and so us. Whereas most sci-fi is sort of fantastical and heightened and big. We're on an adventure. We're having some fun. And I feel like, we've made it very clear tonight that VHS Beyond is fun. It's a ride. I think you're going to really enjoy it. Some horror people out there have an aversion to gore, and this movie has it. So if you're not ready for that, this is a gory fucking movie. So some people don't like to see gore. Okay, it's going to be all over this movie, but I still don't think this movie's like a jump out at you, scare you kind of movie. I don't even think it tries to be that kind of movie.
No.
Yeah, there are and I'll make it 4 for 4. It's not really scary. There are, again, like Chuck said, a couple of moments that are pretty good jump scares, the alien on the truck and a couple other things, but overall it's not really scary. And I think the segment that had the best potential to be scary is the one that you guys love, Fur Babies, but again, that's the one that doesn't really fit in this movie because that one has the opportunity to be the most fucked up, much like Tusk was, but again, didn't really fit. And, you're working with a 15, 20-minute segment. You don't have enough time to really amp up the scares and a thing like that. So, no, it's not. But again, it's a very well-made movie. It's ruined me for VHS movies, though, because now I'm like, I don't think I need to see any of the other ones because this one was pretty good, and I like the original VHS as well. But yeah, I thought, again, there's much scarier found footage films. Like Hell House LLC is the gold standard for me when it comes to scary found footage. Like the first Hell House scared the fuck out of me when I saw it the first time. And Blair Witch when I saw that, when I was younger. Again, good movie, great sci-fi segments, really creative filmmakers. More sci-fi than horror for me, though. It kind of dips more in the sci-fi side than the horror side for what I would assume is a horror sci-fi anthology. So, yeah, 4 for 4. Good. I think we all agree. Good movie. Not really scary.
Great movie.
Yeah, that's fair.
Well, folks, that is our show this week. We obviously want to say a big thank you to our guests tonight, of course, for joining us. I want to give you guys a chance to plug your socials and where people can find you. And if they don't follow you on TikTok, I'll say ahead of time, you absolutely should. So, Justin, I'll start with you. Where can people find you if they want to check out more of your stuff?
I'm on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. The username is the same. It's HorrorTok. Sometimes it's HorrorTok Horror, but you should just look up HorrorTok and find me easy.
And Chuck, he wants to be your movie guy. Where can they find you?
I'm on TikTok and Instagram. My TikTok, I'm searchable now. You could just go into the search bar and put in Chuck the Movie Guy. I'll come up. Hopefully, I think so. Because my ads are all different, but that's where you can find me. I'm big and loud. You can't miss me.
Well, guys, we really do appreciate you guys doing this. We had a blast. We'll definitely have you on again. Of course, Next week, we are rolling into our big October. We are having a big October celebration with all the horror movies. Of course, next week is a big one for everybody on this podcast, I'm sure right now, which is Terrifier 3 officially opens in theaters on October 11th. So we'll be talking about that next week. As always, want to say a big thank you to everyone that tunes in. Make sure you check us out on all your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and of course, over on our YouTube channel. Just search Rewind of the Living Dead. You'll find us over there. If you got questions, comments, movies you'd like us to review, hit us up on email or hit us up on social. You can find us at Rewind of the Living Dead on Twitter, on Facebook, and Instagram. And Patrick and I are both on TikTok. We don't have nearly as many followers as the two guys on our show tonight, but we're building the audience over there, so we appreciate you guys who want to follow over there. But if you do want to find us on social media, you can find me at Damon Martin, and you are?
At Director Patrick.
And a big thank you, as always, for everyone tuning into the show. We'll be back next week with another edition of Rewind of the Living Dead. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you then.
Peace.